the reporting. Summer is the ATP ATRC project coordinator for Caltrans, and she will be facilitating this workshop. So Summer, if you'd like to unmute yourself and kick off the workshop.
Yes, thank you, Nicole. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Active Transportation Program Next Steps workshop. We have several presenters today from headquarters and also from our districts, and we would all like to introduce ourselves. So I will pass it to Desiree first.
Hi, my name is Desiree Fox, and I'm the ATP Infrastructure Manager for North, which is the districts 1 through 5 and 10.
Good morning, everyone. This is Trina Luo. I'm the ATP Infrastructure Project Manager for districts from 6 to 9, 11, and 12.
Hello, good morning, everyone. This is Emily Abrahams, and I am the ATP Non-Infrastructure and Plan Manager, as well as the ATRC, which is the Active Transportation Resource Center Program Manager.
Good morning, my name is Summer Lopez, and I work alongside Emily with ATP Non-Infrastructure and Plans and the ATRC as well.
So Mary is joining us a little bit late, so I'll just do the introduction of myself first. Hi, this is Dancy Ying, and I do the ATP reporting.
Jasmine, you might be muted.
She might be having technical difficulties. I don't see her on here.
Okay, let's pass it to Pedram.
Sorry, I got it. Took a second. Hi, this is Jasmine Noriega. I am the District 10 ATP Coordinator. I work in local assistance and support the Merced County area. And I've been with Caltrans since 2009 and have previously worked with cities and as a city and a county engineer.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar. My name is Pedro Mafi. I am the ATP coordinator for District 6. That is everything south of Merced County and all the way to the Grapevines.
Great, thanks everyone. So a few housekeeping things. The first is that this workshop will be about 2 hours. It's a formal ATP workshop, and we will reserve questions for the end of our workshop. Today, this workshop is recorded and will be posted on the Caltrans and ATRC websites once we finish today. If you have any questions during our slides, please leave your question in the question box below on your Zoom platform, and we will get to it once we get to our Q&A session. We have lots of information to cover today, and we thank you so much for your cooperation. Our agenda today has 9 parts to it. We'll start with first steps, then we will go over the allocation process. We will then go over invoicing and the CTC processes. Fifth, we will go over timely use of funds and then project management. We will also cover reporting and then give some information about the Active Transportation Resource Center. And finally, we will finish with an ATP webpage demo. And once we finish this first session, we will then go into the Q&A session. So your ATP application was successful. Now what? The goals and purpose of today's workshop is to train.
I can hear you now. You're a panelist.
Okay.
Oh. Sorry about that. I think some of us were unmuted. So the goals and purpose of today's workshop is to train Cycle 5 ATP recipients in the next steps towards project implementation and how to get started, and also to refresh prior ATP recipients in the next steps for continuing work on projects and also completion reports and final reporting. So let's go over those first steps. The first thing you will need to do now that you've been awarded is reach out to your district local assistance engineer, or DLAE. Your DLAE contacts can be found on the website that's linked here. Additionally, you'll find information for your district's ATP coordinator. The ATP coordinator is generally the second point of contact, but in some cases it can be your first point of contact once you begin your project. We at headquarters will be notified by your ATP coordinator or your DLAE if our assistance is needed. We wanted to note several important guidelines and documents that are necessary for you to read and understand prior to beginning your project. You can access them at the links on this slide. The ATP California Transportation Commission guidelines, or ATP CTC guidelines, will answer many of your questions, and it should be the first place that you look. You're expected to always follow the most recent guideline document. The Local Assistance Program Guidelines, or LAPG, is another very important document. This document will also answer many questions related to ATP. And if you've been a project implementer for a while, you know that most all of our ATP information was previously listed in the LAPG Chapter 22. This has now been moved to Chapter 25. Another very important document that you'll need to review is the Local Assistance Procedures Manual, or LAPM. You'll find pertinent forms and information on things like consultant selection, all of the different phases, invoicing, important forms, and so much more. Lastly, if you are a non-infrastructure implementer, then you must read our non-infrastructure guidance. Again, the most recent NI guidance is the most important one to follow. All other important guidance documents like the interim count guidance, necessary forms, and so much more can be found on our website linked on this slide. And we will also go over that information towards the end when we give our webpage demo. So now I'll pass it to our district. Pedram, go ahead.
Congratulations. Your application for ATP funds was previously selected or has been selected for Cycle 5 ATP. Now what? Before any entity may proceed with their projects, they need to verify to see if they have a fully executed master agreement in place. Depending on the source of funding, the applicant would need to have a federal or state master agreement or both in place. Applicant should also verify the source of funding to determine if the project would need to be in an approved FTIP. Your selected project may be state-only funded, federally funded, or a combination of both. For state-funded projects, CEQA will be required for environmental clearance, and you may self-certify your right-of-way. For federally funded project, you will need to have, in addition to CEQA, a NEPA clearance, and you would need to go through Caltrans for their right-of-way certification process. We're going to go and proceed with the allocation process and how an applicant may proceed with their allocation request. Once the application is selected, applicants may request allocation from the CTC. On the right side, you will see a copy of the allocation request form, which you may hear us refer to it as the LAPM 25A, which, as Summer mentioned, it used to be called 22A. You can see some of the unique information required by the applicant: specific CTC meeting times, dates, federal project number or the FPN. Please note, the applicant needs to request that number from district area engineer or the ATP coordinator prior to filling out this allocation request. I will cover project phases and their program fiscal year in regards to allocation requests in future slides. Agency's allocation request has certain deadlines, and we will go over that more in detail on the next slide. For now, please note that at minimum, any allocation request for any CTC meeting needs to be submitted 60 days prior to the actual CTC meeting. Federally funded ATP projects will require FHWA authorization, also known as an E76, in addition to the CTC's funding allocation. Please plan accordingly and expect an authorization at minimum a month after the CTC allocation date. That means once you receive your CTC allocation at the commission meeting, you should expect about minimum 2 weeks to a month to receive your authorization from FHWA to proceed with your project. You may refer to LAPM Chapter 3 for further information and guidance. Here we have a an example of the CTC meeting preparation schedule. It's very important to note that if you look at the first column, it's the actual meeting dates. For example, January 27, 28 in Stockton, March 24th, May, June, August, October, and December. You can note that they're not every month. There are months that are skipped. November, April, for example. However, the most important date you need to know is the next column. For the local agency to submit their allocation deadline, to request an allocation, the deadline for that is approximately 2 months before the actual CTC commission meeting. So the first row that we have, it's January 27, 28 Stockton. To go to that meeting, you need to submit your allocation request on Monday, November 30th, 2020. So just keep in mind and always refer to this CTC meeting preparation schedule. And if you don't have that and you have a hard time finding that, please contact your district ATP coordinator and they will provide you with a link to this schedule. These are the phases in a project could be programmed for. We have the P&ED phase, the PS&E phase, right-of-way phase, construction, and construction non-infrastructure. The biggest difference here that you will see for agencies that are very accustomed to requesting authorization for federally funded project is that the CTC sees a project in 4 different components. P&ED, which is your project approval environmental documents, and then your PS&E, which is your plans and specification estimate, right-of-way, and construction. However, for projects that have they're federally funded, you will only have 3 phases. You have a PE phase, a right-of-way phase, and construction phase. But if you program for P&ED and PS&E, they all have deliverables. And without the deliverables, you won't be able to proceed with the future phases. For example, the P&ED phase, you may do NEPA work or CEQA clearance work and some preliminary engineering required to do your project approvals and permits. All these steps will require a master agreement before you can proceed. For plans and specification estimate, you would need to have your CEQA if you're state-only funded, or you will have to have your CEQA and NEPA if you're federally funded project. And you may do the entire design work of your project. And for certain projects that meet the threshold, they need to have the baseline agreement fully executed. For right-of-way phase, you may do right-of-way mapping, fee acquisitions, utility relocation, and the right-of-way certification work if you're federally funded project. And the construction, you may do majority of the advertisement, award, construction, and the construction engineering portion. And some projects may have some non-infrastructure components, or we may have some plans projects. And they need to have part of the application for NI projects or plan projects requires to have the applicant submit a project work plan for which is 25R or 25P for plan. They used to be called 22R and 22P. To proceed with a Con-NI allocation, you need to have previously received concurrence and approval from NI. I will go over that further in the next slide. At the time of application for non-infrastructure projects or plan projects, an Exhibit 22R or P, which now we will be referring to the 25R and 25P, was required. To move forward with an allocation for a non-infrastructure or a plan project, those plan documents will need to be reviewed and approved by Caltrans headquarters ATP non-infrastructure people in charge. You will submit your ATP plan or your 22R to ATP ni@dot.ca.gov, which is listed there. And please CC your DLAE or your ATP coordinator. If anyone has any specific questions, you may also contact the ATP NI person, who I believe for now is Emily Abrams. If you have any further questions for me, you please feel free to type it out in the chat box and I can address them. And I will now hand it over to Jasmine to go over the invoicing.
Thank you, Pedro. So one of the most common questions that we receive at the district is, what do I need to include when invoicing, or where do I start? A good rule of thumb to follow is that everything that's required will be found in the LAPM. For invoicing, Chapter 5, and for consultant selection, Chapter 10 will be your best guides. One item to highlight is that all reimbursable work must begin after allocation or authorization and end before your project end date or your PED expires. The PED can also be extended. However, you would have to go through the CTC process in order to do that. So please keep that in mind in terms of timelines of when you need to request that. So the first step is to make sure that you, the agency, have executed your PSA or your program supplement agreement. This document is prepared after allocation, which is required for all ATP funds, federal or state, and authorization is required for federal funds. It is sent directly to the agency from headquarters folks. This document contains important information such as appropriation codes, official finance letters with project end dates, special conditions, and reimbursement rates. Local program accounting, where the invoices are sent, uses this information to set up your project accounts for reimbursement. The next step is to submit your award package as discussed in Chapter 5. This is required within 60 days of the award or before your first invoice. Apart from Chapter 5, you can use Exhibit 5A, Section 4, as shown on the slide. This checklist will walk you through the required documents needed before your first invoice. So common items that delay invoice processing are the agency not having submitted the Exhibit 10C, which is submitted on an online database, and the link can be found in Chapter 10. The DBE documents for federal projects, Exhibit 10K, which is submitted directly to the Independent Office of Audits and Investigations, and a copy of the contract or the task orders. Next slide, please. So the ATP progress invoicing follows the same requirements as any state or federal program. It's important to stay in compliance by submitting progress invoices frequently or at a minimum every 6 months, as this will keep you off the inactive list. And completing your quarterly reports in CalSmart. This will be discussed later in the presentation. Final reports of expenditure must be submitted to the district after completion. The only difference between ATP and other programs is the completion report and the final reports, which are required as well. Please note that these are now due via CalSmart and will be discussed later as well. If you have any questions, you're welcome to ask your DLAE representative, and we'll do our best to keep you informed. So now I'm going to pass it on to the CTC processing.
Thank you, Jasmine. Hello, everyone. Trina Lu again, and I will briefly explain the CTC processes. As you know, because active transportation program is one of the programs within CTC's purview. So commissioners' action are needed during the development of a programmed project. Typically, we have 5 phases in an ATP project, just as Pendra mentioned in Section 2. We have the environmental phase called the PAED phase, the design phase, also known as PSNE phase, right-of-way phase, construction phase, and the construction non-infrastructure phase. Some of the projects have all phases programmed, and some of the projects just have 1 phase or 2 programmed. For each phase, to get the program funds, an allocation request is required. Just as Pendra mentioned in section 2, the local agency needs to submit the allocation request form with the required documents to the appropriate district before the deadline listed in the CTC preparation schedule. Since the application is on a PSR equivalent, which is in project initiation stage, and most of the local agencies have noticed that more details will be found or more details need to be considered in a later stage, such as PAED phase, PSNE, and or right-of-way phases. So inevitably, some changes might be needed during the project development process. With the changes, the project will be quite different from what was submitted in the original application. With this, if the project scope is changed, the local agency needs to submit a scope change request to the appropriate district. And if the estimated cost for each phase is changed, and local agency would like to revise the program amount for their project phases, a funding distribution change request is needed. These two processes of scope change and funding distribution change will be covered by Desiree in program management section. If the project does not go with the planned schedule, time extension can be used as a tool to fix your project schedule. This will be covered in the next section called timely use of funds. When a commissioner's action has made, it can be found through the link listed at the bottom of the slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, now let's talk about the timely use of funds policy. Next slide, please. The timely use of funds provisions in ATP guidelines are intended to encourage local agencies to accurately program, monitor, and deliver projects in a timely manner. In a project development process, several deadlines must be met. The first one is the funding allocation deadline, which means the project phases must be allocated in the year in which they are programmed. For example, if your project has PSNE phase programmed in fiscal year 21-22, you will need to request allocation for your design phase before the end of state fiscal year 21-22, which is June 30th, 22. The second deadline is project expenditure deadline, which means the project expenditures for PAED, PSNE, or right-of-way phases, actually all three phases must occur by the end of the second fiscal year following their allocation. Counted from the end of the second fiscal year within 180 days. Remember, within 180 days, local agencies need to submit the final invoice for that phase to Caltrans. For example, if a project right-of-way phase was allocated in October 2020, which is in fiscal year 2021, the end date of fiscal year 2021 is June 30th, 21. So the expenditure deadline for this right-of-way phase is simply to add 2 years onto June 30th, 21, which is June 30th, 23. After the expenditure deadline, local agency will have 180 days to submit the final invoice for this right-of-way phase. And the date is December 31st, 23. Now is the third deadline. The third deadline is the project contract award deadline. Construction contracts must be awarded within 6 months of the construction allocation. The local agency needs to submit Exhibit 25-0, award information for state-funded projects, and within 60 days, 60 days, counted from the contract award date, notify the appropriate Caltrans district. And you also can check local assistant procedure manual, which we call LAPM, Chapter 15, advertise and award award project for more details. The last deadline, but not the least one, is the project completion deadline. After a local agency awards the contract, the local agency will have up to 36 months to complete or accept the contract. Here is a note. If you think you need more time for construction, when you request construction phase allocation, you can request additional time beyond the 36 months with proper justification. And the CTC may extend your deadline for completion of work. Yeah, next slide, please. Sometimes the real project schedule could change during the project development process. We have a couple scenarios here. Scenario one, the project is ahead of schedule. If the local agency finishes the required documents earlier, the agency can request allocation to advance this project. For example, a project construction phase is programmed in fiscal year 22-23, but the required documents for construction phase allocation are ready now, such as completed environmental work, signed right-of-way certificate. With this, the local agency can come in to request construction allocation in fiscal year 21-22, and it depends on the funding availability. Caltrans will recommend CTC for the proper action. Scenario two, the project is delayed. When a project phase cannot be ready for the allocation as programmed, or the project cannot be completed within the allowed time frame, the local agency can request a time extension. To get the time extension, the local agency must fill and submit the Exhibit 25A time extension requests to the appropriate district for the deadlines mentioned in the previous slide. The allocation deadline, expenditure deadline, contract award deadline, and a project completion deadline. Please also be aware of the one limitation here. For each project, local agency only can request time extension once per phase per type. For example, a project has PS&E phase programmed, the local agency can only request allocation time extension once and expenditure deadline extension once. In the time extension request, reason or reasons that justify the extension is needed, and the identified reason show directly attributable to the delay, which means an unforeseen and extraordinary circumstance beyond the control of the local agency has occurred. And the local agency also needs to provide a revised schedule considering the requested extension. Next slide, please. The length of additional time is limited to what is permitted in the CTC's ATP guidelines. For allocations, up to 20-month time extension, and for other types, such as expenditure deadlines, contract award, and completion deadlines are up to 12 months. I also want to remind the local agencies that all time extension requests must be submitted directly to the appropriate Caltrans district at least 60 days prior to the specific deadline, 60 days prior to the specific deadline. Here is one thing I would like to mention as well. The allocation extension must be approved in the program fiscal year, which is June 30th. So plan accordingly to get the allocation extension requests submitted. Do not wait and submit the time extension request after deadlines because it will not be considered or processed. If an ATP project was selected by your MPO, your regional agency, RTPA and or MPO needs to agree with your time extension requests as well. So from this slide, you can find the flow chart of the time extension requests. Local agencies get the concurrence from MPO and or RTPA After that, submit to Caltrans district. Next slide, please. This is the sample 25-A. The local agency needs to select the proper checkbox to get the wanted time extension. Yeah, if you want the PSNE expenditure deadline, you check that one. If you want the right-of-way allocation extension, check that one. Yeah, you need to check the right checkbox. One caveat is the later phase allocation extension does not extend the expenditure deadline of previous phase, because CTC considers the extension of each deadline separately. This means each phase and each type deadline has its own extension. For example, if you extend your construction phase allocation, your right-of-way and the PSNE phases expenditure deadlines will not be extended automatically. Remember, will not be extended automatically unless you submit requests to extend expenditure deadlines for right-of-way and PSNE phases. Next slide, please. Here, I just would like to mention again that only CTC can approve or deny the time extension, and the requested time extension is not guaranteed. The local agency is encouraged to attend the CTC meeting to give more explanation to the commissioners and defend their request time extension if needed. With this, I will wrap up timely use of funds and hand it over to Desiree.
Thank you, Trina. In this section, I'm going to highlight some notable project management topics to consider while implementing your ATP project. Next slide. Certain projects may require a baseline agreement, such as projects with total costs of $25 million or greater, or a total programmed amount of $10 million or greater in ATP funds. The baseline agreement process starts after CEQA has been completed, and the deadline to submit the required documents for the baseline agreement is 4 months if CEQA is completed prior to the project being adopted into the program, and 6 months if CEQA is completed after program adoption. Next slide. Also note that the baseline agreement must be executed at a CTC meeting prior to allocating any phase other than the PA&ED phase or the NI phase for combined infrastructure, non-infrastructure projects if conditions allow you to get started on your NI phase early. Next slide. A baseline agreement package includes the agreement letter signed by an authorized officer, which is usually a public works director or similar level, an updated project programming request or PPR, the original approved project application, the environmental documents, and the benefits form. Please note that current and projected active transportation user counts are required for the benefits form. These documents are collected and compiled by Caltrans headquarters and submitted for executive review. It can take around 2 to 3 months to complete the extensive review process and prepare for the CTC agenda. Next slide. One of the most important things to remember is that your application is the approved scoping document. Your project was evaluated, scored, and adopted into the program based on what was presented in the application. Any deviations from the original scope must be approved by Caltrans and CTC. Next slide. There are 3 types of recognized scope changes: design modifications, minor scope changes, and major scope changes. Design modifications are very minor changes to the original scope that do not impact the project benefits and still meet the original intent of the design. Design modifications can be approved by a Caltrans headquarters ATP manager. Minor scope changes do not impact the project benefits or the intention of the original approved scope in the design of the original approved design in the application and can be approved by CTC staff. Major scope changes impact the project benefits and/or the intention of the original approved design in the application and are voted by CTC commissioners at a commission meeting. Next slide. More information about the scope change process can be found in Chapter 25 of the LAPG, the Local Assistance Procedures Guide. To initiate the scope change process, please contact your district DLAE or ATP coordinator for assistance. The scope change request form is Form 25D and has accommodating instructions in 25E. Also, please be aware that your scope change needs to be approved prior to construction allocation. Next slide. To move funds between phases after a project has been programmed, you can do so with the funding distribution change request using Form 25G. The request must be made prior to phase allocations and the programmed state fiscal year. The funding distribution change request form is 25G and the accommodating instructions on Form 25G1. A funding distribution change can only be requested once during the life of a project, and they are voted and approved by commissioners at CTC meetings. Next slide. Funding distribution requests are often confused with shifting project cost savings. When project cost savings are realized after funds have been allocated, 20% of the smaller amount of programmed ATP funds can be shifted into later phases. Although when shifting from PA&ED to PS&E, there is no limit to the amount of savings that can be shifted. Both phases need to be allocated and active, and the funds are subject to the original timely use of funds requirements. This process only requires a revised finance letter. And as with all the project management topics presented, please work with your district local assistance team to initiate these processes. Next up will be Dancy with the reporting section.
Thank you, Desiree. Oh, can you go to the next slide? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about progress reporting. Per the Senate Bill 1 Accountability and Transparency Guidelines, project sponsors must submit quarterly project progress reports to Caltrans towards the implementation of a project to ensure projects are executed in a timely fashion and within the approved scope and budget. What this means is that once a project is programmed into the active transportation program, a progress report is required to be submitted via the Caltrans CalSmart reporting tool at the next available reporting period. So if you don't have one, register for a CalSmart account now, because you get notifications on when to report. So you get notifications 30 days before your reporting time and how long you have. And also you would be getting emails saying that you need a correction or something like that. So again, if you don't have a CalSmart account, please register for one right now. The information that you provide in the progress reports will be compiled and reported to the California Transportation Commission semi-annually at the March and October commission meetings. If you have any questions on reporting, you may email the ATP progress reporting at dot.ca.gov. If you just want to review the reporting deadlines, Q&As that we received in the past, or consequences of non-compliance and additional information, you may go to the ATP reporting webpage. If you're curious and just want to view past semi-annual reports that we have put forward at a CTC meeting, you can also review that at the SB1 reporting webpage. And again, all of these links are available so that you can look at them in a future time on the PowerPoint. And that's it for progress reporting. I am going to hand it off to Mary.
Hi, everybody. I did not get a chance to introduce myself earlier because I got on late. My name is Mary Hardigan. I manage the branch within local assistance that reports on the active transportation program to the commission with the help of Dancy and my team, of course. Okay, so in addition to the Senate Bill 1 Accountability and Transparency Guidelines requiring progress reporting, they also have the requirement of completion and final delivery reporting. And these are two different reports after project completion. And I also want to remind everybody, if you have a question during this PowerPoint, please enter them in the Q&A portion of, I believe this is Zoom, versus the chat, so that we can track it better and use it as a resource later. Okay, so back to my slide. The completion reports are due for all project types within the ATP. When it is due is dependent on the project type. It could be due within 6 months of either contract acceptance of the construction contract or the consultant contract. It could be when the project becomes operable, people are using it, construction is complete, or all non-infrastructures or not all infrastructure activities are complete. In the past, these reports were a fillable PDF. But as of January 1st, they are now included in CalSmart and can be submitted via CalSmart during an open quarterly reporting period. And this is the same reporting period as progress reporting. So it's typically the first 15 days of January, April, July, and October. But these reports cannot be submitted outside of those reporting periods anymore. They used to be able to be submitted anytime, but now they have to be submitted in CalSmart during those open reporting periods. And another reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A section of Zoom. So now these reports are in CalSmart. So you submit your completion report in CalSmart. However, the actual user counts, the after user counts, when you're counting how many pedestrians or cyclists are using these facilities, they're not due yet. Those are not due until your final delivery report. So when you submit your completion report, you only need projected user counts. So as soon as your project is built or all of your education or encouragement activities are done, you submit your completion report in CalSmart to show that your project is done. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So then after your completion report is submitted, then you have a final delivery report that is due. And these are also due for all project types. They're due within 180 days of all remaining activities. And this is activities beyond the completion of the actual project and it becoming operable or usable. This is due within all remaining activities. That includes invoicing or actually collecting the after user counts. So for example, if you took your before counts before you started the project, you took those counts in January, but you completed your project in November. So you would submit your completion report because that project is completed. However, your final delivery report would not be due until after January, when you should be conducting your after user counts, because they need to be conducted the same time of year as your before counts. So now that's what I mean by the final delivery report is due within 180 days of all remaining activities. So that would be the actual user counts and then also invoicing, because your last invoice has to be paid in order for the expenditures to populate into CalSmart. You cannot submit a final report in CalSmart without all of your expenditures populating and show that they have been paid. And these, going back to the counts, these before and after user counts should be conducted using the interim count guidance. And this guidance is actually located on a few different pages that we provide on our ATP websites. It's on the reporting website, the Caltrans ATP reporting website. And then they're also, I believe, included in the technical and general information provided on the general ATP website. But that interim count guidance must be used when you're conducting your before construction counts or before project counts, and also your after counts. And these counts are required for all projects except for planned projects. Planned projects are the only projects that do not require counts. Non-infrastructure projects do require counts. And these final delivery reports are also now included in CalSmart as of January 1st, and they can only be submitted during an open reporting period. And again, that is typically the first 15 days of January, April, July and October. But you cannot submit them outside of those reporting periods. Let's see. Sorry, I lost my. Okay, and then in addition to these final delivery reports that are submitted in CalSmart, there is still a fillable PDF that is required. This is required as a supplemental document because we still need to account for the core usage. CalSmart does not have a space anywhere to show the user count information. It's very generic on budget, schedule, scope, and benefits. So the extra stuff that we need to report to the commission on, like I said, the core usage and the user counts, that has to be submitted via the PDF or the non-infrastructure details. That is a separate document as well. There's supplemental information that has to be submitted per project type, but you can find that on our reporting website, all of the requirements and instructions. So if you are not familiar with that website, I know Dancy provided it earlier in that slide, so you can visit that website and know exactly what supplemental documents are due based on your project type. Just be aware of the website and all of the documents that are required. So after your completion report is submitted in CalSmart, users will still continue to receive an automated reporting reminder that each quarter saying that you have a report that is due. But if your completion report was submitted, so the example that I gave earlier, if you started your project in January, but it was completed in November. So you would submit your completion report. In that case, you would probably submit it in January. So then you would still get a reminder for the following quarter saying, you have a report due. But if you haven't conducted your counts yet and you have not been paid your final invoice yet, you can skip that period. You're not going to be held non-compliant. You just let us know this is not part of our schedule. We are due to do our actual counts at this time, and then you will not be held non-compliant. Your final delivery report is not due yet because you have not finished all of your remaining activities. So don't be alarmed when you continue to receive that notification from CalSmart that you have a report due. Just be in contact with somebody here and let us know your schedule, and we can track that and make sure that you're not held non-compliant. And just a final reminder before I go on from this slide is just always remember that your final counts, the actual final after user counts, have to be conducted the same days of the year that the before counts were conducted. Otherwise, we cannot compare them. They're apples to oranges, not apples to apples. So that's why we have that requirement in place. And again, please follow the interim count guidance that we provide on some of our websites. Next slide, please. So the main differences between completion and final delivery reports is the completion report is basically required as soon as the project is usable. It's done, it's completed. Submit your completion report, and you can just submit your projected counts. Actual counts are not required yet. So that pretty much puts your progress reporting to a halt, and you can finish all of the other activities, which includes the invoicing, like not just submitting your invoice, but you have to also be already paid your final invoice. And then also you have to conduct those final after user, pedestrian, and cyclist counts, and they must be done according to the interim count guidance. And then your final delivery report is due after that. And so typically it's going to be around the same time that after you submit your FROE to the district. And so they've already reviewed that package, looked at the project, and then we can close it out with the final delivery report with the actual user counts, and we have those, the benefits that we need to report on the program. You can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in addition to the CalSmart submittal, like I mentioned, there are supplemental documents that must be submitted. For for all projects, the 25T used to be the 22T. Now it's 25T, and it's currently under construction. It's getting shortened a lot because a lot of the information that you used to report on via the PDF is now in CalSmart. So now it should be just a one-page document coming up soon that only includes the core usage, the user counts, GHG information, anything in regards to, measuring the performance of the program. So it's still required, and it's required for every single project. We also report on the benefit to the disadvantaged community. There's a percentage, but then there's also a section where you can describe it in your own way, how it has benefited the community. So in addition, if there's a combination project that has non-infrastructure components to it as well, there is a non-infrastructure detail sheet that's also found on the reporting website that must be submitted for any project that has a non-infrastructure component. And then the plan projects, they also have their own detail sheet where that must be submitted as well. And these all get submitted to that email address that you can see at the top of the site, ATP final reporting at DOT. And then we try to track those, and we compile this information and we put it in with the reports that Dancy mentioned that we report to the commission in March and October. You can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So these requirements for reporting, they're put in place by the Senate Bill 1 Accountability and Transparency Guidelines. So not only are these requirements in those guidelines, but there are also consequences that they have put in the guidelines that Caltrans will talk to the CTC, and we will decide together what type of consequence is necessary in a certain circumstance. So just know that these consequences could include a written warning. That's usually, an email will let you know we're not getting reports. Do we have the right contact? We're trying to, help out. And then next, the project and the agency gets placed on a watch list, which is an attachment to our report that we report to the commission in March and October. And then it could be decided that the agency is required to appear before the commission to explain. And in most egregious situations, they could be deemed ineligible for future allocations, programming actions, or reduced reimbursements. But we do, I think that Dancy and I really do a lot of outreach to try to, if we notice that someone is not reporting, we reach out to that agency. So we try to do our due diligence to help everybody out, so there are no consequences. Next slide, please. So the counts that I've been talking about so much, the before and after counts, these are so important for the program. They're not even important for Caltrans, they're not important for the CTC, they're important for the state. These counts are what drives the funding for this program. If we cannot show performance of the program, then how do we keep it sustainable? So the before and after counts are very important in order to measure the performance of the program. By collecting this data, Caltrans can report on the impact of ATP investments in relation to the program goals and track the usage of the individual projects. As mentioned earlier, these counts are required for all project types, excluding plans, and the count guidance should be used when collecting this data. Some key points from the guidance includes before counts must be conducted within 6 months of construction or when non-infrastructure activities begin. Before and after counts must be taken at the same time of day and year, and safe routes to school project counts should be taken during the school year. And a little small reminder is, if it is a safe routes to school project that you're taking photos of, we do encourage that maybe you take the photo from behind so that it doesn't show children's faces. If you do show children's faces, we have a form online that you need to complete to submit with your final delivery report so that we can use it to showcase that project or showcase the program as a whole. And for other important methodology considerations when you're conducting your counts, please always refer to the count guidance. And there's also flash training found on the ATRC website. I think, yes, we can go to the next slide, please. Can I? Oh, thank you. So the Active Transportation Resource Center, which I think we're going to go into a little bit more in detail in some later slides, they offer an automated counter loan program. It supports the collection of and maintenance of pedestrian and bicycle data. It provides agencies the ability to borrow equipment and assist in meeting expectations for conducting user counts. And the ATRC has made it so simple. They have this equipment available. And the process is so easy. The first step is to just simply visit the ATRC website and complete an interest form to begin the process. And then somebody will be in touch with you. And they have this available equipment here on the slide that is available to you. And it's just encouraged to use it. So lastly, along with the progress reporting information that Dancy said earlier, the completed project information is also reported and is required. These documents and resources can be located on a reporting webpage, and I encourage anyone that is reporting on a project to subscribe to our reporting listserv that is also located on the reporting webpage. You can, I think the reporting webpage is provided somewhere here, but if it's not, you can find it on the ATP website. I know there's a link on the right side. Find it, go to the bottom of our reporting webpage and sign up to our listserv, because we send out reminders and you'll never be non-compliant. You'll always be aware. And I think that's it from, yes, on to the ATRC.
Great, thanks everyone. We are getting close to the end here. So now I'm gonna give a quick overview of the Active Transportation Resource Center. So the Active Transportation Resource Center, or ATRC, will provide many resources to help you successfully implement your ATP project. Our purpose is to provide resources, technical assistance, and training to transportation partners across California to increase the opportunity for success of active transportation projects. Our website has tons of fantastic resources, online and in-class training. We have training webinars and teleconferences for non-infrastructure implementers. We also have safe routes to school resources, so many different tools, and so much more. So if you have not yet signed up for our listserv, we ask that you please go to caatpresources.org and sign up today. You will get notifications about all of our new resources, trainings, webinars, all of our upcoming events, anything that we have going on, in addition to other pertinent ATP announcements and anything else that we need to notify you about regarding ATP. We also tend to forward CTC announcements. So it's just a really great place to get your email address on our listserv and receive a bunch of information, very important stuff. So now I will pass it to Emily. She's going to do an ATP webpage demo for everyone.
All right, let me share my screen here really quick. Okay, so we wanted to give you all an overview of our webpage. As you've heard throughout this presentation, there are many forms and documents and references and guidelines that you should be aware of. And so they are all posted on our website. And so we wanted to give you an overview of where you can easily locate them. So right here, I am on the main Active Transportation Program Caltrans website. The web address is here at the top. It's dot.ca.gov/programs, local assistance, fed and state programs, active transportation program. But you can also, Google Caltrans Active Transportation Program, and it should take you right to this page as well. So this is the main page. It gives the overview of the program. There's a fact sheet and some general links down here, but this is the overview. The thing I wanted to highlight is this box on the side right here. This is kind of a menu bar or almost a table of contents of the different web pages that you can reference. So the first one I wanted to point out here is the ATP general and technical information. So if you click on this web page, it takes you here. And this is really kind of your home base for all forms and documents and guidance you may need to reference. So we've divided the page up into different sections and then subsections. So as you can see, the first two sections here are on program guidance. So we will always post the latest program guidance here. And this third section is all ATP documents and forms. So again, as we've referenced throughout this entire presentation, the various exhibits of Chapter 25 are all referenced here. And then we have divided them up into subsections. So allocation and time extension forms you can find here, scope change and fund distribution changes you can find here. Any of the plan and non-infrastructure forms you can find here. And then reporting, we have a link here. But I will get to the reporting webpage, which has a lot more detail. But in addition, at the bottom here, there's other information on other components of the program, such as the core, master agreements, audit information, and then some additional resources. And actually, we will probably post this presentation right here at the bottom of this page, as well as on the ATRC website. So this is where you can find this presentation. All right, so back to our little menu bar up here. The next two pieces are the ATP Cycle 5 and then ATP Cycles 1 through 4 archives. And both of these are really for application. So if you remember when you submitted your application, you probably went to this website, and this gives you all the information on the call for projects. So very shortly, we will archive this page and archive it onto this, this other archives page. And then we will set up a cycle 6, which is coming up in the fall webpage. So this will change, but this is kind of application archive. The next one is the timely use of funds. So if you click on this page, it gets into some of the details on timely use of funds. And again, you can reference the allocation and time extension form here as well. So, so this is a page to reference for that. Going on to the ATP project reporting page. This is where you can find all of the detail that was just covered in the presentation in terms of dates and links to different forms, etc. At the bottom here, there is some, you can pop these out. So for quarterly reporting, if you drop down this menu bar, it'll give you more information, and the same for the final and completion reporting with a lot of links, including the photo release form and other links there. And then you can sign up for the listserv as was mentioned. So then moving on to our ATP completed projects. So this is a page that we are continuously populating, and when projects are completed, we would like to develop a project profile is what we're calling them, and it basically just highlights the success of the project. So we want to showcase the great work that you all do when you finish and complete these projects. So so we have a few non-infrastructure ones here. We have an infrastructure and then some completed plans. We, like I said, will continuously populate these more. So if anyone does have a completed project, you can definitely let us know, and we will work with you to complete one of these. And I'll click on one just to give you a sample of what they look like. They're just 2 pages, give a summary of the project with some before and after photos, along with some quick facts and project benefits, and then a little bit more about the project. So, so yes, this is our completed projects page. Also, we have an ATP Technical Advisory Committee. If you're not familiar, we have some members on our TAC who represent the diverse state and give us input and feedback on the active transportation program. So if you want to know more about that, you can click here. And then lastly, the Active Transportation Resource Center, as was just mentioned, this is our website, and we have all of the different training and resources and technical assistance that can hopefully help you in delivering your project and developing active transportation projects. So really quickly, I just wanted to show you our website. In our menu bar here, we always have our latest information on what's upcoming. So this is where you can get the most up-to-date information, as well as the mailing list that was mentioned. So sign up here to be on this list and receive information. These 3 buckets on the webpage are our different resources that we can provide. So you can click on training, and then we have various training listed here. If we go back to the home page, if you click on resources, again, we have all our different resources listed here. You can click through these and get more information. And then lastly, for our technical assistance, we have all our technical assistance information here, including the automated counter loan program and other different types of technical assistance we offer. So I just wanted to make note of that. There's some other links up here, so definitely go and explore this website as well. And with that, I think this concludes the website demo. So hopefully this helps you navigate the website and lets you find these documents and references more easily.
Thanks, Emily. Okay, I'll go back to sharing my screen here. So we have a few reminders before we move on to our Q&A session. The first is, remember to contact your DLAE and ATP coordinator. Your district will be your first point of contact. Second, remember to follow your original scope of work. If you need to modify your scope, please contact your district coordinator and they'll work with you. Number 3, remember to do your pre and post counts. Always follow the interim count guidance methodology, and if you need to, you can utilize our free automated counter loan program through the ATRC. Number 4, remember to take photos. This is the best way to showcase your project outcomes. And remember, if there's any faces of minors in your before and after photos, we do have a photo release form that's linked here. And you must fill that out if you're going to send us photos. I saw a question that asked if we could blur out faces. And I suppose if you cannot get a good photo from behind, and if you don't fill out the photo release form, I suppose you could blur the faces. But following these instructions are the best way to provide excellent photos. Also, Emily showed the project profiles. I encourage you to go through there and check out our different project profiles. It'll give you inspiration. And when your project is complete, you can reach out to us and we'll feature your project in a project profile. Number 5, the Active Transportation Resource Center. It's the best resource for you to find training and technical assistance and resources. Please join our mailing list, and you can check out all of our free trainings, resources, and tools. You'll see everything that we have to offer when you go check out our website, so just take some time and explore it for a while. You can also request technical assistance, and we have more technical assistance to come, and we'll announce that on our listserv. And finally, you can reach out to one of our partners, CDPH, the California Department of Public Health, at atsp@cdph.ca.gov, and they can provide you non-infrastructure specific technical assistance on call. We also have a link for that on our website if you're interested. And that concludes our formal workshop. We are now going to move into our Q&A session. We did receive several questions in the chat. Please, if you have any questions from this point on, submit them in our Q&A box. That's where we're gonna start in the chat, and then we'll move on to the Q&A box to answer questions. Additionally, once we finish that up, if you have any pressing questions and you'd like to raise your hand that you need to talk, we can also unmute you. But we're gonna start here with our chat questions that we received.